Hi everybody, this is Hero, back with another Fellowship video. We're just going to check out very briefly the kind of end of Fellowship and do some wrap-up thoughts about the game on the whole. And you have some Meiko gameplay in the background here. I did get to check out mostly just two characters, Vigor, the one healer, and Meiko, this monk-like tank. And so far, I'm most impressed on the gameplay side with Meiko, the tank, meaning I feel like it has enough going on, enough to sustain my interest from pull to pull and dungeon to dungeon. There's enough interesting synergies and choices within the talent trees that it makes for a compelling gameplay experience. And I think that's kind of important for this next phase of Fellowship because unfortunately they're going to now have to compete with a price tag that they put on their product when they eventually launch it, and people will not be as interested in complaints or excuses that the company might make about performance or about balance or about different kinds of problems with the game. So a beta test is really a great environment to do some of these checks, but one thing I think people don't realize about the industry is that this was the interview. And the players, in addition to really enjoying the gameplay, also were contending with the response of the servers, with the way that the devs thought through how to communicate about these things. In other words, you can call it a beta, but this is people's first experience of the game. And so going forward into the launch, there's maybe a bit of a grace period for the beta, but if a lot of these issues are not resolved, players will already sort of have a strike against the game for how this launch went. Now, I don't blame them. They're a small company and they got hammered. Their servers got completely destroyed at the launch because so much interest was there. But I think this is a factor that we don't really realize how important it is that you get it right, and the smoothness really communicates to your player base that they can trust the devs to sort out these problems. I think the devs have done a reasonable job under the circumstances, but there are still a lot of serious server issues that I think will remain in people's minds, even though if you jump on now and try to queue, everything seems pretty decent. So that's a little bit of a hurdle for them, I think, going forward, is holding on to that goodwill in the community. The other piece of this is the way that this model works, jumping in and out of dungeons. You're going to have an exacerbated version of what WoW experiences with the lever system in Mythic Plus, meaning people who get into a dungeon, a few pulls in, something goes wrong, and those people immediately decide, I don't want to keep going. I'm just going to quit and find another group. And WoW recently introduced a new model for that, and I'm not sure if that's been very well received. Now, these are different games, but to my point, unfortunately, there's going to be a need for Fellowship to really grapple with how, in a game that's only associated with these dungeons, and there's no open world, there's nothing else to do, there's no market or fishing or trading or economy really. How do you ensure that this lever issue is going to be resolved? People are benevolent in a beta, generally speaking. They're happy to be here and check things out. But when money's on the line, um, we'll see a lot of different people in coming out and saying, I don't like how this worked. It didn't work out. The people just kept leaving my dungeons. I couldn't progress. Um, when I tried to find people, there was really no way to do that within the game that's reasonable because people don't have a guild necessarily that they can draw on. The the group chat's filling up with people looking for group, but um, the system isn't really designed to support that very well. There's no way to reasonably filter for folks and know whether they're going to be good or bad. One thing that's going for this game is the fact that you have, well, let's move this along because I think we wipe on this boss one time, maybe something like that. One thing you have going for this game is that these are short dungeons. Typically, you have the one boss model, which I like. I think it's really quite good. And then the 3 boss model is a secondary feature that's larger, and they have plans to scale and do different things. All of it sounds good on paper, but in practice, gamers are very fickle, meaning they will not put up with things that they find distasteful for very long. There is a lot of competition for what you can and cannot play, and people can just pick up a different game and play it. Totally fine. I still think this game is really worth considering. There's, as I say, enough in the gameplay loop that feels in, really engaging, that I have control over my character, that my talent choices seem to make a difference in what I'm doing. And on the whole, there's enough compelling options that I can see they can put into the game to keep it fresh. I will say another point of this that's really important in my mind is the freshness of a new character experience. Excuse me. By which I mean the freshness of, we'll jump back to the beginning of this one. The freshness of how easy it is or difficult it is to start and gear a new character. For a game like this, in my mind, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's essential for them to make it difficult and rewarding in that respect to get to a new character. And I think they have a pretty good model for that. You can easily get through a good portion of your talents in the quick play system, and then you have to grind up through adept and challenger and so on, just like you normally would on the others. There's not a lot of overlap, which is totally fine to me, because you have a hero-based system more like LoL or Dota. The fact if you can just immediately level up because you have an alt that's at some really high level, then you're going to have this problem of burnout for people. Now, you don't want to make it too hard, and so the sort of shared stash, the shared gold, the opportunity to buy some stuff to get your character going, I think is reasonable. I think this is a bad pull here. I'm trying to like Cyclone, but I do it wrong. In that you can get your secondary character going a little bit, but they still have to go through the process of climbing with their gear score all by themselves. I think this is actually essential for the survival of this game because it creates niches where people can grind and pursue one character and become proficient at it and get a bit of a reputation. And that sticks because it's not easy for someone to just flip, toss on a bunch of gear that is shared from party members. You know, they grind a bunch of dungeons and toss them 3 or 4 pieces of gear at the end, and suddenly they're ready to go. No, you have to do that work yourself. And I felt going back and forth between Meiko and Vigor in the limited time with all the servers crashing still gave me that sense that this is a really good type of progression for this game, because if you expand the pool to 30 or 40 champions or heroes, there's no way you're going to master them all, but you know that somebody else has devoted the time to do it, and that's kind of compelling because you feel like there are people who are really good at X character or Y character. There's these insane Ardeos players that are out there when everyone else is trying something new. So a new character comes along, and then everyone switches to try it for a bit, but there's people who have decided, you know what, I want to just really master this one and grind it and devote my time to that character. So I think that model should stay. I don't know if they can maintain that because there's going to be a lot of pressure for people to say, hey, I like the WoW model where I can just immediately do what I want and I don't have to worry about this poll gets a little crazy in a second here. Where I want to just be able to jump onto a new character. Not in agreement with that. What are the things I like about Meiko specifically? There seems to me to be a couple of avenues, and I haven't got into champ yet, so you have to take this with a grain of salt, but just judging by a lot of the conversation and thinking through what other people are up to, checking the leaderboards, seeing how people are grinding, seeing what options are available, I think the spirit-oriented builds, CDR-oriented builds are going to be really strong because you have uptime on your DR. But there's also a space for these more burst-oriented builds that are not so dependent on uptime and that would be something where you can kite. I think this is relevant because in a game like WoW, when you're doing Mythic Plus, kiting mobs around is one of the most effective ways to do a dungeon because no one's taking damage if things are just running at the tank. Obviously, there are mechanics within the Mythic Plus scene that prevent you from constantly kiting something around and taking no damage. And Fellowship has an interesting moment to have its own take on what they want to do with this kind of gameplay. But I could see for Meiko, for example, you running into huge packs, dropping your totem, bursting for a while. The totem dies, you have a couple of charges of your Earth Shield up, so your DR essentially. If you want, like, a couple of 8-second windows of DR, 16 or so. And then the pack is in a place where you can more or less kite it around. And you just choose routes in all the dungeons where you don't have to deal with a lot of casters. You avoid those, or you have a kick rotation for a few, that kind of thing. And what I think you end up getting is a really different flavor of Mythic Plus, where it's more strategic. You're planning your group properly. You're controlling certain mobs. You chicken one or something like that. That to me means there may be some more freshness. One of the things that's going to be great for Fellowship is that a meta will develop, but then it will always get adjusted by the fact that you have incoming new dungeons all the time, as well as incoming new characters. So those will always give you different opportunities to approach each of the dungeons. Maybe one's got a special skill that lets you do a skip. Maybe one's got a huge damage boost in AoE that turns on really at 10 or 15 mobs, so you can do gigantic pulls. Maybe you have the opposite, where something can do insane prio damage, and it's worth it to do these smaller pulls that are more targeted. So the big mobs are not as much of a problem, and some of the challenges that were there before because you wanted to avoid the cleave or the bleed mobs, that kind of thing, are no longer a problem. This is what I think a new game offers the genre, is the opportunity to explore some of these elements. And Fellowship looks like it's in a good place for that. And Meiko in particular is a great example of the sort of hero they can build that has opportunities to do multiple different approaches. I mean, I suspect it's just the sustained CDR, especially the one weapon Fated that gives you a bunch of CDR. This is a crazy pull too. Is likely, unless it gets nerfed, is likely to be the go-to, because being able to press your buttons more often, generally speaking, means better defenses. You survive, you can kill more, etc., etc. But my guess, obviously, once they do tuning passes, is that will get heavily nerfed, so that it's competitive with some of the other options like the ice one and the beam that you're seeing me fire off here with the single target pyro damage. But that's kind of my takeaway, guys, from the game in general. Really enjoyable experience. They have some challenges ahead of them. I think I'm deciding, because we're waiting for a guy, if I can funnel onto the boss. I know we don't need the percentage, but I'm just kind of goofing around here. Oh, I guess we technically do need the percentage. But yeah, that was kind of my takeaway from the game. It's kind of better than I thought it was going to be. I don't think it's a WoW killer, partly because it has to really overcome that challenge first and show over time that it has the pedigree to give good gameplay all the way along, and that it's sustained past some of the serious problems of the community, by which I mean people who just end up leaving a dungeon because they don't like a pull like this, for example, and they complain and whine and they're gone. That won't be healthy for the game on the whole. But thanks for sticking around and checking some of these out. If you like the Meiko content, you can let me know in the comments what you think, and maybe we'll see you guys in October.